Thank you. We had a workshop within our office a couple of weeks ago to talk about this next urbanism idea and the idea of the vertical city downtown San Diego. How to make the next set of urbanism, and I'll talk about why. This is intended to be a workshop. This is intended to be a follow-up. I don't have a specific answer, but I want to get there, and I know I think I'm on the right path, and I think that the people that have helped me get here have better ideas too, and that's what this is about, an exchange of ideas. So what I'm going to do is this introduction right here. Then afterwards, I'm going to do the big idea presentation, which should take about 25 minutes. And then I have this is going to be the other one, panelist discussion and response for about 15 minutes. I've got Doug Austin from AVRP Studios, Haneen Cater from DeBird's DBRDS Studios downtown, and Frank Walden from Walden Design. And we've all known each other for years. And then after that, I'm going to open the discussion up to everybody here. First, I'd like to thank the San Diego Design Week. Lindsay is helping us right now with the technical aspect of this, and I'd really like to thank Stacy Kelly for putting this together, putting the whole week together. And I hope you all have registered for multiple events. It's a really great event for San Diego. I'm glad to be a part of it. So thank you all for being here, and please mute yourself now. And then when we get to the end, I'll ask everybody who wants to speak to raise your hand in the participation group first. Eventually, I'm sure we'll just talk out loud, I hope. And I appreciate, again, you all being here. Okay, so why San Diego? What's San Diego as a city that does have great history of innovation? Hey, Frank, thanks for being here. San Diego, the Salk Institute, of course, is one of the greatest buildings in the world, but we also are the beginning of the ranch style house. The Cliff May and the Ranchette back in 1935 was a completely new building type that actually fit with, let me see, the problem I'm having is that Lindsay, the text that's at the bottom is covering up where I advanced the slide. So thank you very much. Oh, it didn't stop.
Oh yeah, so Howard, you can stop that on your end, and this goes for anyone else listening in. There should be a button that says live transcript with an icon that says CC. And if you don't need those subtitles, select hide subtitles and they will go away.
Where do you see that? I'm sorry.
It's at the very bottom, the control panel, where you can see share screen or pause and stop recording. There should be an icon that says CC or live transcript.
Let's see if I can do it with a different way. No, darn it. I'm so sorry, everybody. I don't have the ability to do the transcript stopping. Stop recording. View full transcript.
There should be a hide subtitle option under live transcript.
I want to go help him.
Can't do it. And I can't advance my slides with it on. What do I do here? Hang on. There we go. I did it. Thank you very much. So why San Diego? 1935, the ranch house of Cliff May also was at the same time that the Federal Housing Agency for the federal government subsidized suburbia and suburban sprawl. The intent was for the federal government to finance and help subsidize and help protect through insurance, mortgage insurance, the building of a mass building of homes for the middle class and the working class for the first time. And Richard Neutra, very famous Vienna architect, Gerrit Ekbo, a very famous landscape architect, worked together to put together the Fha Handbook. And it was all displayed at the 1935 World's Fair, Panama expo grounds. Mike will tell me what it was called in 35. But in 35, that was where this was revealed. And this was revealed in order to help build suburbia, build housing, as actually socialized housing for the most of America. And it was a very big move and a very bold move that San Diego was the first to present to the United States. We didn't invent wildfire, but we did invent understanding of greenhouse gas emissions. Scripps and Walter Monk and Keeling, Mr. Keeling, and the Keeling curve understood how much greenhouse gas emissions were emitted. And that was invented in San Diego. Now we understand climate change and we understand the sea level rise, drought, flooding, and extreme weather with wildfire much better than any other cities. So that's something that we understand well. So why the idea of a vertical transect? Well, you know, a jargony sort of word. I like this image because you can kind of begin to see the beginning of there's two sorts of vertical living here. The buildings on the right and the tan, where you have the outdoor patio stepping up to the taller buildings, whereas the other buildings on the left don't have that same sort of outdoor living, so that it can learn. These buildings can learn from each other as we move forward. And San Diego is a great place to be. My guru or inspiration comes from Leon Creer. Leon Creer is an architect from Luxembourg who says that the architecture of the city and public space is of tremendous concern, and they're the foundation of civility and civilization. And I believe that the places we shape are important to us. They cultivate our culture, tell us who we are and where we're going. But Leon doesn't quite agree that this is a good idea. So I'm kind of challenging my mentor because his idea actually is about mixed walkability, and he helped cultivate and create the new urbanism, or the practice of mixed use walkable urban places. And that's where the Transect comes from. Andreas Duani and people in the new urbanism over time had come up with this tool to look at the city, to look at places individually, like a transect, which is actually an environmental tool to study the habitat, the flora, the fauna, the soil, the rain, those things that are either up in the mountains or down at the sea. And this is being applied to either your downtown, or you're in midtown, or you're on the edge of town, or you're out in Julian or Ramona. And that's those place types inform you of where you are and where you're going. What's the next step? So it's an urban analytical tool that studies a symbiotic relationship of habitats. That relationship, just because you have the mountains and the forest and the beach and the ocean, while an ocean is not the mountain, they all work together. Same goes for here. And you'll see that the diagram on the left is Peter Calthorpe's transit-oriented development. That is something San Diego had a hand in creating too. Mike Stepner hired Peter Calthorpe to work on the transit-oriented development design guidelines in 1989, I believe, or 91, about the time the Uptown District was being planned too. And these were the idea of a transect is that there's a center by the transit, near the transit station, that becomes less intensive and less developed as you move away from the transit station. And so that idea, I'm trying to apply vertically now, and I'll tell you why. The idea that the street level is the street life, and that's the most urban. Then you move up to the midtown, the mid level, where you have a little less things, little fewer options or choices of what you can do. And then as you get to the top, it really becomes quite singular, and you're set in nature. But this concept isn't just new urbanism and just Peter Calthorpe and Leon Creer. This is what's also guiding the state of California's new housing and development guidelines. This is the SB 50, but if you look at the pieces and the parts of SB 9, SB 10, what's coming out with SB 6, or what are states doing? And please go ahead and mute yourself, Lindsay, if you can find that person. And so this idea is proliferating throughout California and our state laws. So why look at this vertical transect? Well, you'll see me go back to Leon a lot. Leon rightfully identified that after the Industrial Revolution, the creation of steel and the steel frame and concrete and glass, that we ended up with about 3 modern building types that we had never had before. One of them is the landscraper, which is the big, big office block or a big industrial building that's just a large steel frame building called a landscraper. Or you have the sprawl, the suburban sprawler, which is the individual house built at an industrial scale, just thousands of it at a time with along a new freeway built by federal funding and things of that nature. And then finally you have the skyscraper, which was the new ability to go very high. And he identified the skyscraper as like a vertical cul-de-sac that was a network congester on the street level. And that the suburban sprawl was something to be fixed and that the landscraper was to be done. Because I agree, and once again, this is where Leon and I depart. We've actively, as new urbanists and mixed-use walkable urbanists, we've actively retrofitted suburbia. We've taken this on. We're retrofitting our corridors. We're retrofitting with infill. We've been promoting this for 30-something years, and we're finally able to do it. Suburban sprawl is okay to be retrofitted. We need to start retrofitting the vertical sprawl. Another trend after suburban sprawl suburban retrofit that's been around for a while is the High Line. About 20 years ago, the High Line came out as a great idea for reusing existing infrastructure. But really another lesson learned from the High Line is that it actually provided vertical public space in a vertical big city, New York City, the most vertical city in the world. And so it's beginning to do that a 3-dimensional sort of public space, public streets, and public parks, which I think is very important. Another latest trend is this Barcelona Superblock, where the idea of Barcelona, which is not a vertical city, it's a very walkable, vertical and walkable horizontal city that allows for that is saying we're going to use our streets differently. Some streets are going to be for bike only. Some streets are going to be for complete streets with bikes and pedestrians and cars and trams. Some streets will just be cars and trucks and services. So different types of streets in the same neighborhood super block is a big idea that's taken off across the world. The latest, greatest trend and phase in urban design and planning is this idea of Paris in the 15-minute city, which says you can access most of your life needs within 15 minutes. And that's a 5-minute walk or a 10-minute bike ride or a 15-minute car ride or transit ride will get you to your every daily, weekly, and monthly needs, such as daily coffee, weekly grocery store, monthly I need to buy a new watch or something. Not that I have one. And those should be accessible in a more complete, compact, and connected city. So those are the trends. I'm back. So those are the trends. So why now? Why now in San Diego? Well, the context has changed. If you look at the picture on the top, that is our Santa Fe Depot train station, which was one of the taller buildings in San Diego and was built in 1915 for the Panama Expo. And if you look at the picture on the bottom, you'll see that it's not even close. It's not. We have had 120, 150 years of being able to build steel frame skyscraper and tower technology has allowed downtown to change its context dramatically. You can even see it here in the last 20 years where I believe this is an old Marriott hotel downtown that was one of the first hotels downtown with a 5-story parking garage with about a 10-story a hotel above it. And today it's barely seen in the downtown ballpark context. And we all know the Padres are going to get to the playoffs, darn it, and play better than they did last night. But it's transformed downtown. Our downtown has changed dramatically to be more of a vertical city. But the issue that I have is that for the last 150 years to get to this point, we're using the same technology as used for the very first skyscraper tower in I believe this is one's in Buffalo, and the Woolworth building, I believe. And but it's all based upon the idea when the steel frame came out, and we didn't ever have a building like this before. We just copied the classical column that had a cap, a middle, and a base. And that column, that classical column, is what gives structure and design guidelines and any sort of design for a tower, follows that very first idea of what a tower should be. And we've done a lot of variety to that tower. We've made it shaped in sculpture. We've made it mechanical, repetitive patterns. And there's a variety of ways, of a very narrow, tower with a cap, a middle, and a base. And we've built, complete cities using this in the last 150 years. You got Dubai, you've got Vancouver with its point towers, Dubai with its large pods of development, a variety of heights and densities. Floriantinopoulos is on the bottom there, along where you want to be in those towers right in front, because you ain't seeing the ocean when the tower's behind it. And then of course, like Taiwan and in Asia, has the slab tower that fits the construction techniques of the mid-century for them as well. So you've got these types of places and these variety, but they're still, at the end of the day, just a cap, a shaft, and a base. And that's the thing is that network congester. That's the thing that Leon was saying is a vertical sprawl. So what's different today? What's different? Well, first, COVID has really helped us see that we see streets differently. The open streets, the parklets, the outdoor dining, the outdoor living, the walking around, the getting out of the house because we just had to get out of the house, helped us see the streets differently, helped to see the neighborhoods differently, helped to see recreation differently, helped to see shopping and retail differently too. Because of what COVID's done for us is opened our eyes to being outdoors and being outside. So there is, and this has been going on now for a year and a half, and hopefully we won't get too deep in it over the next 6 months, but we're coming up into the winter time in San Diego, and we'll see how it goes. But it's a lesson learned. It's very, very strong, and it's changed our lives to a degree. The next, I did something, is social justice and social equity. Understanding that the most appropriate urban design response or approach to social equity is equilibrium, finding balance. Too rich of a place without affordable housing needs to be balanced. Too poor of a place without market driven housing it needs to be balanced. There's the need to balance the economy. There's the need to balance our governance. There's a need to balance our population. You have pods of seniors here. You have pods of families over here. We need to find balance and equilibrium in our design. And that leads to the idea again of Leon Creer. And so he says that there's a balance, there's a comfortable balance as to, it's kind of like Goldilocks. The modern is too hot, where there's just too much public space and the buildings are set off too far away, and it's only drivable. You can't walk there. Or it could be too much, an old Venice or something, where there's just too much urbanism and it's too tight and it's too cold. You can't get around. It's very congested. Or there's a good proportion, which he felt to be about 25 to 35%. So this balance at the figure ground is something that Leon had studied. So I studied it for the U.S. West cities. Sorry for the technical difficulties. What I found in my study of a couple U.S. West cities is that using that balance is that Portland is pretty proportionally great. The blocks are small, the streets are small, they're well balanced. They're able to have bikes and transit and cars and walking all on the same streets, but it's not too wide like Salt Lake City, which is out of balance, which is just too great. And then San Diego, the differences are too great there. And in San Diego, we have too wide of a streets that are mostly one way and mostly quite high speed. And we have the ability to find balance in our streetscape because we only have about 60% of a private development and 40% of streets to take care of and maintain. And they are too wide and they are too fast and they are a one size fits all approach right now. So looking at streets differently is a good idea for San Diego because we have the room on at the figure ground at the plane level. Now at the sky level, San Diego's pretty has room to grow as well. This is Toronto is in the dark in the middle, and then New York City is in the gray in the back. And this is our skyline. I'm calling it a figure sky. And our tallest building is about 450 to 500 feet, whereas Toronto's in the 900 foot, and then New York gets into the much larger and averages are higher than Toronto. So there's the ability for us to fill in not just on the ground, but in the block, the vertical block as well. Now, finding that balance again, Leon Creer has an idea of the quarter, and the quarter is really the idea of a neighborhood that you can. It's a 10-minute city that you walk from one edge to the other in about 10 minutes, and from one edge to the center in about 5 minutes. That 5-minute walk where somebody can push a stroller, or somebody can use a cane, or a kid can ride kid can walk with a family, or an able-bodied person just walks as much as they want. The 10-minute type of city is something that he espouses, but he says it only goes 10 minutes. You can only have a 5-minute walk vertical as well. The walkable city isn't just at the ground plane. The walkable city is at a vertical plane too. And he says that we really only physically walk up 5 or 6 floors, which is the equal to the equal energy to walking 5 minutes from center to edge. And that's where he ends the height. But Jan Gehl did a really great study of showing a relationship between people, and that's what this is supposed to be about: human scale, people engaging with each other, connecting, and that about that same distance, that 4 or 5 blocks, or about 25 to 35 feet, is the distance that we can still hold a conversation. You can at the horizontal as well as the vertical. So if we understand that these are done, these human connectivity is done at that scale, about 65 feet is comfortable enough for us to continue to engage and understand each other. That'll help us understand how to get a human scale at the vertical level. And then I say, dare to be outdoors, San Diego. Of course our weather is our best thing, because our weather is the best thing. And being outside to work and to shop and to play and to learn is just the best place to be. So unsealing ourselves, hermetically sealing ourselves in cars and with air conditioning, and in buildings with the windows, and being able to be outdoors is our best feature. And we need to be able to make that standard, because that's the best thing that we can do. And that's actually what Barcelona does so well. Barcelona is a great world city. San Diego usually tends to admire Sydney, Australia, and because it's a coastal city. Now Barcelona is a coastal city too, but Sydney also is a long way away, and we can kind of fill in whatever we think we need to fill in to understand, to make that comparison that we're like Sydney, because so few people have been there, although I know Frank Walden has. And so the Barcelona model of being an outdoor, being a gridded pattern, being culturally diverse, being walkable in every scale, and then also transit is a great model. And that Barcelona block is something that San Diego can do. So I took this as this is that area between East Village and the gas lamps downtown. So just more East Village. And I applied this idea of, right now, the current condition is each one of these 60-foot wide streets and 80-foot wide streets are 80 feet from building to building, are usually one way, usually high speed, and they're all the same. And it's a very difficult sort of experience to be out on the streets today. Using the superblock model, you'd use a variety of streets. The main circulator streets would be around the edge of the superblock, and then you would have bike streets, parkway streets, pedestrian streets, green streets, and you would have a variety of place types associated with a central park idea in one of the blocks. So I just did a quick sketch to show that this is how our construction and building of a Barcelona Superblock, with the outside complete streets and the interior smaller streets and parkway streets and parks would look in the East Village. So I took it a little farther and thought, well, how would that apply to an entire neighborhood? So this is all of this is East Village North, and you would have several super blocks within it. And so I took one of the Barcelona 10 block super blocks in that same area, which is about 160 acres is a complete neighborhood. 112 in downtown is compact, and that's it's a good size for a 5-minute walk from center to edge. It's about a quarter mile from center to edge there. And then you apply the super block idea, where the red is the complete street that has cars and trams and bikes and people, buses. And then the interior streets become different. You have a green street, you have a parkway street, you have a transit. That C Street is a transit street. Broadway is a obvious main street that separates between these other quarters. So this would be the super block idea of 4 super blocks that would break down into 4 of the careers quarters. So the quarter system would be about 25 acres, and this would be a 5-minute walk just from that center on one side to the edge on the other. So looking at that little 5-minute walk, you can have 3 different types of streets. The parkway street, a bike pedestrian street, a green street that has a plaza park in the middle with no cars, and then a more complete street around the edge. And even on the outer edge, you would have where trams and buses and everything would be, and it would all be accessible within just a couple minutes walk. So looking at that, you would then be able to plan and say along the edges where the tan is, that around the edges would be where the taller buildings would go, and then you would be able to be down and have smaller streets and smaller connectivity in the interior purple, and then you would have a park with your greenway street and along the edge. So you'd have a couple different types of parks, a couple different types of streets, a couple different types of blocks, and that's a complexity that would allow you to have this sort of building pattern where you have a variety of building types that go around the park, which is different from the interior, which is different from what's around the edge. So the idea then is to be able to move from the top left is the old Sprawl Burger, the parking lot in front, the old Sears store where the Uptown District was. And then about 30 years ago, we started doing the Dallas Donut. And then we've moved on. Frank and I have worked on a building in North Park, Texas and Howard, that we call the Danish, which has no center donut hole. It has a variety of building types, the variety of unit types, and the variety of place types that center around a focal and a plaza on the corner. And then the idea is to start to begin to make that vertical, combine this stuff and bring it all up. So this is a retrofit of the beginning strip commercial on El Cajon Boulevard to a building that's complex and a variety and interesting and connected with human beings. Robert Stern has done this idea to a degree in New York City, called the New York City block, where he has a low rise in the mid blocks and towers on the corner, and mid rise, which in San Diego would be high rise. This variety of block is a model that's used for urban places when Robert Stern does his planning and design around the world. And then that vertical complexity, the idea is that that first level, that street level, has the most mix of uses, the most connectivity, the most focus on the street. The below grade and up to 6 stories are all focused on accessing that street life in that street. And even then, when you get to that mid-block level, you begin to cross at upper levels that create a gateway into the Barcelona quarter. Into the quarter. You don't need it on every block because you don't want to cover up the street, but you can have gateway types of connections at the mid-block level that has a few less uses. This is where you end up having more of your play and open space stuff that's a amenity that's above, but you have to coordinate that, because block to block, if there's the party going on over here in their open space and the party going on over here in their back private, people complain. We got to be able to align now at that mid-block mid-height level to put the amenity spaces with the amenity spaces. So when people party, they party together. And when they sleep and they're private together. And we have fronts and backs all oriented so that there's less conflicts. And then finally, at the very top is where you end up with more of your rural natural settings. You're out in space, you're out in the sky, which is like being out in the back country. You can actually generate food or energy or create natural spaces above there. Just less uses. Your office in a home is about all you need, and that's the idea of this vertical transect. And then you can begin coding at the municipal level for the planner. You can code the vertical layers, and then you can code the horizontal layers as it goes from the front to the back of the building. So it begins to be a vertical complexity rather than just a design guideline that says the base is this and the middle is that and the cap is these things. You can actually plan and coordinate mid-block, top and street level more efficiently in an urban setting using this vertical transect place-based idea. And then the inspiration for where I got this stuff. The upper left is in China, where there's a tram that's on. Obviously, this is built into the side of a mountain, but the transit is at the mid-block, which is actually interesting. You know how we like to put the trolley down the middle of the freeway, and yet you can't get to the places that they're supposed to be getting to because there's this big freeway crossing. With the trolley on the ground, it doesn't actually get up and down. So you have like the L in Chicago, and where the trolley and the transit above actually gets you into a more of a three-dimensional access to the block. This other you can see the larger picture on the right is in Kansas City, where the street parties with the upper mid deck that parties with the hotel building. This is all one hotel, but the idea is that these spaces or party places are all part of the amenity package for staying in that hotel, and it's a three-dimensional hotel experience. And then the lower left is Allegro and buildings that Doug Austin's working on. There's actually a third building going on here at Cedar and Kettner that's going to have a white stripe going up for the Italian flag. And these buildings now have a light and physical relationship with each other on the corners of the block. The other block is the Lind project. But this is, you're going to have a three-dimensional block down in Little Italy soon with Doug Austin's work. And then Frank Walden taught another one. This is down just a few, 2 blocks south of the Allegro project, which is the Treo, where it's conventional tower system, but Frank understood that he was trying to create these sky streets. And he was trying to connect the tower to the townhouses, to the podium, to even eventually across the street. And hopefully Frank talk a little bit about that after here. But you can see there's a variety of building types doing a variety of things, and the Sky Streets idea is quite interesting and unique here in downtown San Diego. And then maybe the best example of built with this three-dimensional is going on at UCSD in the 6th college. The idea that there's amenities for students at the housing level, at the mid-rise, and then the schools and the classrooms and the research and the technology is on the ground floor, and it has its own parks and spaces coordinated with it. And these buildings are coordinating themselves up, and you could actually do another building in the future that could be a taller building that has a relationship there. And this is built at UCSD. And then finally, this is Jonathan Siegel's idea that he's trying to put next to his existing building in Little Italy, where he's taking the air rights of the building, and he's able to build taller next to it with the understanding that that this mid-block tower won't be covered at the corner by a new building, because he's taking the air rights of his existing building that steps up, and you can kind of see there's a level of small, medium, and large all working together to create this block corner condition that you could replicate on all four corners in our 200 by 300 blocks. It's 24 stories. It's a 5,000 square foot lot. The FAR is over 20. They have 70 parking spaces for this area, and there's affordable housing involved. It's not being built yet, and the idea is that he's self-financing this, which is very unique. My understanding is that he sold most of his properties so that he could build this building with his own money. And that's what gets back to the UCSD. UCSD is not a same type of financial lender as conventional lending and financing in towers in downtown San Diego, because they have the regents, they have a money, their own financial model. Jonathan Siegel has his unique financial model. I think that's why you're seeing these buildings, because right now the financing is in the way, is against it. And hopefully we'll talk a little bit more about that with Doug Austin. But the steps to get to this next urbanism, in my opinion, is at the bottom, financing reform. Just as the federal government stepped in to help build suburban sprawl for middle-class housing and create an industrial scale of single-family detached housing as far as the eye can see, we need the federal government to step in and help with mixed-use mortgages. It's very difficult to finance a mixed-use building, which I'm saying we need as much mixing as possible as we move from the bottom to the top. And the federal government has the ability to finance these mortgages and the lending institutions as they should, as they've done in the past, as they did in San Diego. We also need some coding reform, or zoning reform, vertical place types, variety of building types, variety of street types, and a variety of park types. We currently are working on open streets and changing our streets. We currently really only have 2 or 3 types of parks, and the new parks master plan is trying to change that. So we understand the need for code reform. It's just time to do it, and we need to do it by place types rather than by place types citywide, rather than by use types, because when you make this use, then you have to do everything to make it mixed use. All the rest of your zoning ordinance is to make it mixed use. If you just make it mixed use at the beginning, it streamlines it and makes it easier to do with objective design standards. And then finally, the market shifting. I was in a meeting, I was in a presentation earlier today with Mary Walshaw talking about the UCSD building downtown that they're they're opening soon. The innovation, that's part of the innovation district with the Idea One project, the library project, the new School of Architecture, City College, San Diego High, that intellectual corridor of innovation. And then the life science hubs that are all spurting up downtown at Horton Plaza, at the RAD, at the waterfront, and Kilroy and East Village. And there's a lot of technology, these life science technology hubs being built and proposed right now, the new one that's in Little Italy, or changing our streets and the open streets. And we're able now to move commerce out and take back some of that wide one-way streets in order to have a more intimate type of street that has a more intimate setting that then can be in conjunction with or directly connects to the wide street that has the tram and the trolley and the buses and the high traffic. And so each block can have a variety of types of experiences on it. And then finally, the mode sharing. We know we don't use cars the way I used to use cars, which was to drive around and try to meet other people. And now I use my cell phone. This technology here is every bit as powerful as the car was back when I was young, trying to get out and meet people. Our mode sharing is incredible. And then I'd like to say I feel a bit validated by it all, because of the city, New York City's planning director said nothing great is going to happen unless you get the politics, the design, and the financing to line up. Right now, our design and our financing aren't lined up, but all of our politics is pushing towards mixed use, walkable infill urbanism at an urban level. So that's the idea. That's the big idea that I wanted to put out there. Now I'd like to ask my panelists to weigh in. Doug Austin, are you available?
Hi, yeah, I'm available.
There you are. I hear
Yeah.
you. I
Well,
hear you.
yeah, if you want, yeah, look, I love what you just presented. It was great history, great connectivity to San Diego and what's going on. And one of the things I get to do from time to time, and I'll get to do tomorrow morning, is act as a planning commissioner. And so we see that side of our cities that's political or has to do with government. And the last point you made was they all need to line up. And that is just so true. And one of the challenges we have, everybody knows we have this huge affordability crisis and housing crisis in California and San Diego as the same. And I'm serving on a panel that's trying to find ways to create the missing middle. I think that somebody said that in the last decade, we've only built, and I got two estimates on this. One was from the new mayor and one was from our planning director. How many housing units have been created in the last decade in the city of San Diego, one of the largest cities in America, that would qualify for middle America? And that would be probably between 80% of AMI, area median income, and maybe 150% of AMI. And one estimate was 10, and the other was 3. And that's pretty ridiculous. So we need innovation in every single area. We need innovation in design and buildings, but we also need innovation in financing. There is no financing really for middle America. There's financing for people that have enough wealth. There's financing for people who have the lowest amount because they have subsidies. And then we need innovative government. Some places we can benchmark places. You mentioned places like Portland, but Seattle is one that actually was probably more innovative when it came to designing for middle America. So one of the reasons I'm saying this is I went to a seminar a long time ago, and there was a guy from, I think it was the Boston Globe, who'd gone all over the country trying to find out who was designing America's cities. And after going all over for a couple of years, he decided, well, one, it's not the architects, it's not the planners, and he said, well, maybe it's the government or whatever. Anyway, the bottom line is he came away saying that what's designing America's cities is the deal, and that means what makes it work, what allows it to get built. So if we want these innovative solutions like you're presenting, Howard, we have to figure out how do you make it work. Because I love some of your thinking there. So if you want to get it built, how's that work? So there are things we can learn from different cities. One of my favorite is Vancouver, because their public realm is so fantastic, but they also, in order to get that, they had to allow for a scissor stair. Well, that's an architectural solution, right? That allows for skinny towers so that you don't have that city you were showing where you block all the views. You can have these skinny towers where actually you're not allowed to build a tower that's over 6,500 square feet. Well, we can't build those and make them work because you have to separate the stairs by 30 feet, et cetera, et cetera. There's other things like modular design that could help high rises become more affordable, but we're not there yet. So I'm kind of bouncing around, but I guess what I'm getting at is these are wonderful ideas. How do we implement them? And if you can get somebody as innovative as Jonathan Siegel, who can solve his buildings and make his own demands. The building you showed that we did, that was a guy who built that building cash out of pocket. And there aren't a whole lot of us that can do that.
Oh, you mentioned about Vancouver, the for sale versus for rent financing.
Oh God, let me just talk briefly, and then I'll let others talk. But one of the biggest challenges in California, and one of the problems we have with affordability and not getting enough housing built, is that if you build something that's attached, which is where most of the city governments wants us to go, they want us to build infill. It's, if you make it for sale, you're almost guaranteed, probably 99.9% chance there will be a lawsuit. because of the way the system is rigged. And in Vancouver, two things make it hard. One is you can't really get enough deposit money. So if you're going to take this huge risk, like somebody developing something like the Smart Corner, and because it gets delayed by the government, they have to give back 150 deposits. And so that project fails. It got built, but for the developer, it wasn't a success. They lost all their money, right? Because couldn't get it built fast enough. So that's innovation. But also they could only keep 3% of the deposit money. Where in some place like Vancouver or Florida, you can keep 30%. Those people aren't likely to go away. The other thing is they don't have the lawsuits that accompany attached housing, because different mentality, definitely in Vancouver, a different mentality. So those are things that, talk about government and what are the things that keep that from happening. If you want home ownership and you're going to make it attached, you need to fix those things. I'll be quiet.
Thank you, Doug. I appreciate that. Haneen, when we spoke before, you talked a lot about downtown planning and programming. I don't know if that's what you want to talk about now, but I appreciated that discussion. So what do you think?
Okay, so I know we talked about this a little bit, but I do want to go back to that last quote that you shared, the politics, design, and financing coming together. I think the biggest problem we have is that the politics currently does not support the local empowerment and growth that we need in the city of San Diego. I think a lot of the municipal laws and the financing and everything, whether it's international financing that's funding cities that people don't live in who are financing it, or the laws that give you so many loopholes that you can build whatever you need to build to put it up there, does not really adhere to any kind of urban planning in general for the city. There's no organization. There's a lot of private companies or private ownership to things that are not public based or not in favor of the public. So I think politics is a big one. I think the city of San Diego has to just prioritize the people versus the tourism. So our programming has to be more based on the locals versus attracting people and getting money from tourism and having temporary situations and all that. Because what San Diego is doing is it's creating a transient city by not providing housing where you can expand after a studio, by not providing opportunities to commit to the city the way other big cities can. So diversity in housing, like you said, but also implementing some kind of overall plan that locals can actually commit to, like you said, hourly, daily, monthly, what's being served. So I think, politics really has to get on board. I think finance and politics have to work together, and maybe the architect has to have more of a voice from a design perspective and prioritizing local empowerment versus trying to get everything from the outside of the city. So there's that. The civic pride comes along with all of that. If you have a transient city, why would I stay here? How do you populate the city? How do you have commitments to the city, right? That's one thing. And the second thing San Diego does, it has everything, like you said. It has climate, it has atmosphere, all of that. But the issue is that it's not accessible. So I have waterfront all along the city of San Diego or downtown San Diego. I can't access it. How do I get there? How do I enjoy that? Like you said, parks. How many parks do we have? We have Petco Park and we have Balboa Park. Where do I go for lunch if I'm going to work? What am I doing with my day? If I live there, how am I moving in the city, right? So we're always building in defensible space. And I know the excuse is, well, the homeless population, I don't want homeless people in my building. I don't want them in nooks and crannies and all that. But I mean, is it reasonable to build in defensible space in a fear-based design mindset? So there's a couple of things that San Diego is not really nailing the right way, if that's the right way to put it. But I think it has to do with politics. the government has to prioritize funding for public programming, whether it's contributing to a developer to create flexibility in design, to create diversity in housing. And I know that's a big ask, but I think it's required to create a city that you're asking us to build, right? So it's a couple of things. I mean, there's a lot of other things, public transportation, C Street. I don't want to sit there. I don't want to hang out there. I don't want to take the train if it stops there, right? So how do you create a more desirable public transit system? And I'm not gonna continue too much because I do want an opportunity for other people to join in. But the other one question I had about the presentation was a super block. Is that one per village, or is there, how many would you put in a city, or what's the spacing like, or how often do you create those opportunities?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was using just a quarter system based on a neighborhood, but I didn't do it through the whole city. You saw I kind of did it in one area of East Village transitioning to gas lamp. And I just finished it before we started this.
Well, that's fine, but what I'm saying is,
But it's a great question.
can that concept carry through, and how often would you put it?
But you know that, and that gets, okay, so downtown is going to update its community plan. It has to, it's time. The code is now too old, it's on 20 years. And it's time to update because none of the incentives match the things that people want to incentivize today. So it's going to happen. That's the things you're bringing up is where that conversation is had. But then I think you're really making a good point of saying, just because we have the policy that says mixed use walkable infill, if we don't put the dollars and the people to implement it, then we get that, you know, that extra turning lane on Cajon Boulevard on the Fairmont that was in the news yesterday because nobody's minding the barn. It's out there, but the political will to make it happen isn't there yet. Is that fair to say, honey?
Yeah, I think it's fair. I mean, yeah.
Well, Frank, speaking of, okay, yeah. Thank you, honey. What do you think, Frank?
Unmute, Frank.
Sorry about that. You know, I guess I have a different, I'm going to introduce a different perspective on things because I've heard for many, many years that, you know, everything else is in the way of great architecture and great solutions. There's no doubt that financing, that government, that, you know, all these different things have roles in this process, and we need to constantly work on fixing them. But on the other hand, I guess my viewpoint would be we need to demand more out of ourselves. We need to go back to the design community and say, we need to have more vision. And I'll drive these equations over time. And I'll actually go back and, you know, if I could, and talk a little bit about the building that you showed.
Please.
The trail project. There's a lot of things about that were driven by vertical experiences and creating addresses in the sky and all kinds of theoretical ideas like that. Multiple building parts on one block that would create, you know, different financial type, different market types and things like that drove that. But at the end of the day, I had a client who really pictured a box, a simple box. And we were able to, by using all those mechanisms, talking to him about it and selling those ideas, to create something that had all kinds of crazy ideas associated with it that looks nothing like a box. At the same time, I was working on another project called Renaissance. And to put a comparison there, Renaissance was a $72 million project, the same height and approximately the same program as Treo. And Treo had all these crazy ideas in it, and it was $55 million project. So part of my point is these projects all go together in different ways. There are different ways to lead to different design solutions that address planning and architectural goals for the city. I think, you know, and I can see Polly on the screen. I know his, you know, we mentioned Australia earlier. The expectation is is much greater there. And the architectural community, and to a large extent in unison, the planning community has carried that city into, much greater design and expressions of design than San Diego has. We need to try harder. We need to create a greater expectation and learn how to put ideas out there that stimulate people to figure out how to make them work. I think too much talk about politics, too much talk about economics and all that stuff kind of puts the issue in the wrong place. We have to look at ourselves and say, what kind of power do we have to do great things, and how can we advance that? It's not going to happen on every project, and it's not going to happen overnight. But what you see downtown right now is something I started it downtown at a very young age, and I can tell you, I watched the evolution of what drove downtown and what is today. And you look at that evolution, that was led by people who put ideas out there, whether they were architectural ideas, planning ideas, landscape architectural ideas, and ultimately over the past 30, 40 years, dramatically changed what's possible. What was possible in downtown back then could be explained pretty easily. I mean, I was part of the Horton Plaza team, and we had no choice but to design an internal mall. It was the only way the world would accept a shopping center downtown. The early housing, if you look at it around Pantoa Park, was envisioned to be, two-story townhouses, and some of them were built. At one point, the entire 120 acres of the Marina District was proposed to be that same thing. 2- and 3-story townhouses built throughout the area because there was a concern that the market wouldn't accept more complicated urban projects. And you can talk about it in just about every area. I mean, to your point about streets, 25 years ago, outdoor dining was illegal in San Diego. So what really changes things is a long-term view and a vision and the rigor and, that's required to put new ideas out there and move the evolution of downtown forward. And I think there's a great opportunity to do that now. I'm not saying that the issues that we face in politics and finance and all these areas aren't real. I'm just saying the other side of it is we need to create much greater expectations for what we do.
Great. Thank you, Frank. I'd like to open it up to everybody now, and I'm going to start with a question from the chat of Doug or anybody here, actually. I remember that a couple years ago before COVID, the AIA, the American Institute of Architects in San Diego, was going to open their offices and design center at old downtown Johnny Brown's in the City Hall Concourse. What's the status of that? Because the comment was, how do people get their design ideas out? Just regular laymen who don't have a design studio. People like to complain that where is a place where they can go to make ideas, put ideas forth for such as the coming update. Is there any what's the status of that design center idea, which is what that was intended to help with?
There may be somebody more knowledgeable than me. Is there somebody from the AIA board that's in this?
I see Mike Stepner turned off his microphone, so he's ready to tell us.
No, just to fill out the design center. The AIA still has a lease on what was formerly downtown Johnny Brown's. The COVID experience in financing has held up a lot of things. And so it's not dead, but it's coming back slowly. As Frank said, it's a long-term vision that takes time to implement. But it's an important thing to have. And I think that we've talked about it for years here. It's time to get something. So if everybody who's on screen with you, Howard, contributes $1,000, we can really get the thing off the ground tomorrow.
But
Mike,
part of the
names, Howard, names.
I'm not asking every.
Oh, behind that was to, and that was when our friend from Chicago, where the city actually is really much you know, more in love with the whole idea of architecture in our city. You know, and that's where that kind of came from. And it's, those kinds of things are important really too, to introduce to the rest of the public, you know, the importance of these ideas. I think that was part of that, right, Mike? To create a showroom and to start talking about things other than, you know, things we don't want.
Anybody have a comment? Anybody?
I have a comment.
And you can just, Haneen, just to say, if you'd like to make a comment, just in the participants, you can raise your hand or just speak out, unmute yourself and speak out as Haneen did. Thank you.
Okay, I have a really quick comment, which I agree with Frank, everything you said about we are not innovative and we have not been thinking outside the box and all that. And I've had a lot of conversations with architects around.
Wait, what do you think I'm doing? What is this?
Let me finish. So
Good job, Howard.
Maybe we're not innovating as much as we should. And I believe maybe the wearing down from the VE portion of development and construction and all that has beaten a lot of people down. But the concept of us versus like us putting all the work in and donating the money and doing all that is kind of like saying, global warming is happening. If everyone recycles, it's okay. But when you have the bigger corporations who are being way more destructive and can actually make change, you're asking the people to do the work when the governments are against that. So that's why when I say politics is really important, and politics needs to prioritize the locals and the people and the permanence versus the transient oriented design, it's not because I think they're the ones to blame. Absolutely, all of San Diego is predictable, if I have to, so it's a little predictable when you're walking down the street. You know the building that's going up, it's going to be stucco. You know the building that's going up, it's going to be 6 to 8 stories. Like, yes, there needs to be innovation, but how much can you really contribute when the final say in construction is almost outside of your hands? That's why politics comes into play. But I agree with Frank. I don't think we've been as innovative, but I don't know if it's because we haven't had the freedom or the backing to do so.
Well, I'd say that maybe we need to become better salespeople. We sponsored a selling ideas, right? Because we sponsored a symposium on housing innovation up in Los Angeles, and we had a lot of the heavyweight folks that are well respected. And the last speaker to speak was Tom Main, and here's one of the most innovative architects out there, especially when you look at the visual impact of his buildings. And yet he said, I'm not into that, even though he is, and he'll continue to do it. He says the most important thing is we need to get more involved in politics. He says we'll get it right as architects because we know that part. But I have to admit, I found that surprising that would come from Tom Main. But I also agree with Frank that as architects, we have to be bolder. And some of the best buildings that were built were done because those architects were so passionate that they were good salespeople.
I have a question on the chat. If somebody else would like to speak up, just chime in. I noticed maybe, oh no, they turned their mic back off. I've got a question of, can public housing be an incubator for architectural innovation? And I say that public housing, affordable housing projects, there is a few new ones in downtown. There's the one on Broadway and 9th Street. That is bridge housing that Studio E, Eric Naslin had, and they have the opening, they have the view openings in the windows, the offset that look down the street, which is innovative in a way that it's oriented. What issues do you see, Doug, about affordable housing innovation and design?
Well, it's interesting. Right now, it's a very, very competitive process. It's harder and harder and harder for even the most experienced affordable developers to get funding. I think the last time they went out, there were I think 36 grants made or funding that was agreed to, and they had something like 130 applicants. But I would say that there are lots of examples where affordable housing is some of the most innovative and some of the best housing we've had in San Diego and elsewhere. And it's because they,
And you're gonna get more.
and well, one of the reasons is you can use subsidies to
Right.
fill the gap. You don't have to make it pencil. That's why there's no middle America. If the project has enough wealthy customers, you can make it pencil. But it's really, really tough to find that middle ground. And if we can use some of that energy Frank's talking about to help solve that, we'll do a huge thing for our city and for our state.
I appreciate Bill Keller asking in the chat to talk about opportunities to innovate along El Cajon Boulevard and University, because this idea actually isn't intended just to be downtown. It is about being a city of villages where there are village centers in every neighborhood within each community. Any thoughts, Haneen, Frank, Doug, Mike Stepner, about innovation along El Cajon Boulevard? It's easier than it used to be.
And you have a lot of places along both those streets and other corridors that are just prime for redevelopment. Some are vacant lots, some are vacant buildings. You have buildings that perhaps could be revitalized. You have also a lot of viable businesses. I think the thing that you have to really be concerned about is how you make it fit. I think innovation is a terrible word for architects to use because it says, look at me, I've done something, I've twisted the building around, I've shown how my computer can make funny drawings. And I think really recognizing that housing or whatever it is has a user, it's the people, and it is a political act. We are changing people's lives as designers, and we've got to recognize that politics is as important as design, and getting someone to pay for it is also as important as design.
I'll say this about El Cajon Boulevard and University. I was on the planning group when we did the community plan update, and I worked on the urban design element directly. And the thing that was in the way really was I'll say the planning staff inertia, the status quo. And we were negotiating with ourselves at every turn. And we actually put in some pretty innovative stuff with this transit and pedestrian oriented emphasis zones that had a lot of little gimmies in it. But that's all changed because in the last 3 or 4 years, we now have complete communities. We have the affordable housing density program, and all of that is now out the window because the zoning is now more advanced than a 6-year-old community plan update that really only added about 700 homes on the plan, but had incentives to do a lot more. And you're seeing a lot more, and you're going to see a lot more on that corridor because the BRT line is intended to be a major focus. The issue though is we shouldn't be expanding the auto roadway as we're trying to get multimodal on these thoroughfares in these corridors, and it's very, very important. And the issue, of course, is just like Toronto. If you look at Toronto's transit neighborhoods and their old communities, you'll see that transition is very important. You can go quite big. You can get a lot of housing and a lot of mix of uses in that half block along the corridor, which is quite large in San Diego, to step down to those single family homes that are now fourplexes if they want to be. So that's part of that placemaking by different Transect zone ideas at the state level. They're unlocking the single family homes to do more. And then locally, we've unlocked to do more on the corridor right now, today.
See, Howard, just when you guys were talking about El Cajon Boulevard, I was thinking about other kind of long, mature corridors, in cities like, say, going across Manhattan and some of the longer boulevards. And of course, bringing things to a pedestrian scale and providing transit and all that kind of stuff is critical. But the other thing that strikes me is that these streets have like changing characters, and they're understandable. They have to do with where there are parks or where there have been historical events or where commerce popped up in a certain way and things like that. And one of the things I think we need to think about along corridors like El Cajon Boulevard is that they could become long streets of the same thing. And particularly just thinking about infill architecture and how it happens. So how does a kind of a, I guess a kind of a joint approach between the larger goals of the community and the city and the architect working in these areas really over time result in these places being kind of changing experiences? Because if you have, 3 miles of kind of the same thing over and over again, it's not going to be interested. It's not going to be reflective of the changes in communities, and the communities do change there. So I don't know honestly what the status of that thinking is, but I just think it's an important, really important thing to think about. And maybe for the architects more than for anybody.
I think, okay, so I think there's a couple of good points there. The constant change is inevitable. I think any city that, I don't want to say matters, but any city that matters will be flexible enough with constant change. I think the sensitivity that San Diego forgets about is that a lot of the places that are considered opportunity zones are exactly that, opportunities for people to come in, buy the property, benefit from the tax breaks, and build for the people. The issue is people who have lived in these communities and built the communities as what they are today do not qualify for that opportunity zone tax break. So you are asking that the growth not be local. So there's a there's a difference between community growth against the community and then community growth within the community. So if you're bringing up a community that is capable of growing with the change, it's a different concept, it's a different environment than just putting anything anywhere we can because we can, and we keep saying affordable housing crisis, yada, 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 when the crisis is the middle class, which is being pushed out because of these opportunity zones and all of this affordable housing talk. So I think it's more of what are the sensitivities, what is the disconnect between the people that we are serving or providing the built environment for, and then us as architects, what do we think people need or want from these communities, and then developers and investors who may not live in these communities who have the opportunity to come in here and make some money, right? So there's disconnect between 3 different people. Everyone wants their own benefit, but I think that the priority is the local that lives there. How do we empower that community to grow within the community it already lives in versus displacing? So, I mean, again, it comes back to money, and I understand it doesn't pencil, it's not going to work, blah, 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 but there has to be a priority somewhere. And like you said, as architects, we need to take charge a little bit and have hard boundaries about what we're willing and what we need to do versus what we're told to do and what we're allowed to do, right? So
just as a follow-up, I think that the point of displacement is kind of moot about El Cajon and University.
Right.
In the first layer is just suburban strip commercial BS building, and you're not displacing anybody when you build on that first layer because nobody's been allowed to live there because it's illegal from the commercial zoning to do it. So you're building in there and you're not displacing anybody, you're adding housing to the community so that you have the ability to have a variety of prices and a variety of people living there, except for that one group of person protected by Prop 13 tax that own their home and are aging in it and growing quite wealthy, and won't sell because that is their largest investment in their lives. And the idea of changing that to be the fourplex is a brilliant idea because the people that live there have to stay in one of the units, and it'll help add to the value that they have because it's more units, even though each one is less. And then each one that's less allows a less wealthy person to move into that neighborhood that's all grown in wealth over the last 40 years.
Do those rents match what's happening in the neighborhood, or are they higher?
Well, they usually match the market, right? I mean, they usually match the market, but a studio that's available in a single family home of, a 1,500 square foot single family home, and you have a 400 square foot studio, that's obviously cheaper than the home that's there. I mean, what I'm saying is there needs to be a balance. You can't
Right.
just, you can't just stay static, but Prop 13 really helps you stay very static. It's a very helpful aging in place tool, which is something to be said for that. You don't have to move when the values go crazy. So anyway, I'm ranting. I don't have to keep anybody here longer than we have to. If nobody wants to raise their hand, if nobody wants to make a comment about the darn presentation.
No, Howard, I thought it was great. I just wanted to finish up one thing on El Cajon Boulevard.
Please.
I think you made the point. Is El Cajon Boulevard was really kind of a tough place just even to drive through, let alone walk through. And I think it's improving because the things that are getting replaced need replacing. And Polly, didn't we give an onion to a project that didn't do enough? I think it was because they wanted to keep a drive-through there, and I thought it was well deserved. It wasn't for architecture; it was for a lack of vision, as Frank might say, and it missed an opportunity to keep building on what was, I think, going in the right direction. El Cajon Boulevard.
It was actually for a Starbucks that was following national design regulations.
Yeah, that's
than
amazing.
paying
It has
attention
the
to-
driveway on the street. The driveway fronts El Cajon Boulevard.
Yeah.
So Howard, just in closing, I think your presentation was great. I listened to you talk about bits and pieces of this stuff all the time, and it was great to see it all come together. So thank you for sponsoring this.
Thank you all for being here. Seriously, thank you for my panelists. Thank you for everybody that showed up and stayed here and listened. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Mike Stepner, Polly, with your cameras on. Thank you for listening and writing in the chat. I appreciate it. And I hope you all have a really great evening. And let's keep thinking and let's keep talking. And I'll see you at other San Diego Design Week events. It's really a very rich program, and I hope that you go others. Don't forget, don't sleep on the San Diego Architecture Foundation. That's another tremendous organization that talks about design in the better part of San Diego. Polly, do you want to make a plug for that at all while I have you here?
Sorry, my apologies. My dad was texting me. Sorry, not that everyone needed to know that, but I was responding. I wasn't paying attention. What was that?
What's to say? I just wanted to give a plug for San Diego Architecture Foundation because the San Diego
Always.
Design Week is great, and you guys have
Absolutely.
something coming up.
We do. I know that we have a kids, one of our Beep Kids sketch events on Saturday, September 11th, which was actually going to be hosted this time by Kurt Hunker and Mike Stepner. So we've always got a lot of great events on during San Diego Design Week. Happy to be supporting and participating in that, and lots of events to follow as well. Thanks for the little plug. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you, Lindsay, for helping me with the logistics. And you all have a great evening. I'm going to say goodnight. Thank you all.
Great job.
Yeah.
Thanks, Howard.
Thanks, everybody. Good seeing the faces and names.
Night, Howard.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.